Okay, so I have two articles for you today. Both of them have to do with ICE because that's the big shit show going on right now in the country. So let us start with. Now, both of these articles are from the AP. But let us start with a U.S. citizen says ICE forced open the door to his Minnesota home and removed him in his underwear after a warrantless search. Now, this was 3 days ago, but if any of you have been following the weather, if you're in the U.S., or if any of you are familiar with the weather in Minnesota around this time of the year, it's freaking cold. And I'm not just talking about the fact that we're enduring a ice box like we haven't had in years. It's just cold in Minnesota in January. It's just not, you're not going to have tropical weather in Minnesota in January, so. Anyway, a federal immigration agent forced open a door and detained a U.S. citizen in his Minnesota home at gunpoint without a warrant, then led him onto the streets in his underwear in sub-freezing conditions, according to his family and videos reviewed by the Associated Press. Chong Lee Scott Tao told the AP that his daughter-in-law woke him up from a nap Sunday afternoon and said that U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement agents were banging at the door of his residence in St. Paul. He told her not to open it. Masked agents enforced their way in and pointed guns at the family, yelling at them, Tao recalled. I was shaking, he said. They didn't show any warrant, they just broke down the door. Amid a massive surge of federal agents into the Twin Cities, immigration authorities are facing backlash from residents and the local leaders for warrantless arrests, aggressive clashes with protesters, and the fatal shooting of mother of three, Renee Good. ICE is not doing what they say they're doing, St. Paul Mayor Coley Herr, among Americans, said in a statement about Tao's arrest. They're not going after hardened criminals. They're going after anyone and everyone in their path is unacceptable and un-American. Tao, who has been a U.S. citizen for decades, said that he was being detained. He asked his daughter-in-law to find his identification, but the agents told him they didn't want to see it. I'm sorry, what? You're detaining someone, but you don't want to see their ID? Yeah, that's totally what up law enforcement agencies do. They totally disregard any ID. They don't want to know if they have the right person. They just want to be thugs. Instead, as his 4-year-old grandson watched and cried, Tao was led out in handcuffs, wearing only sandals and underwear with just a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Videos captured the scene, which included people blowing whistles and horns and neighbors screaming at the more than a dozen gun-toting agents to leave Tao's family alone. Tao said agents drove him to the middle of nowhere and made him get out of the car in the frigid weather so they could photograph him. He said he feared they would beat him. He was asked for his ID, which agents earlier prevented him from retrieving. That is just... this is beyond Keystone Cops level shit. First, he wants to get his ID to show them. And then they're like, no, we don't want you to show us your ID. And now suddenly they want to show... I'm sorry. How in the hell, for the people who are so screaming, oh, if you just followed what law enforcement said, How the fuck can they do that if they're being given contradictory information? Like, oh, let me show you my ID, or at least let me retrieve my ID. Oh no, we won't let you do that. And then after they know he doesn't have his ID on him because they wouldn't let him get it, then they want his ID? I'm sorry. This kindergartners are better at playing cops than this. Agents eventually realized that he was a U.S. citizen with no criminal record, Tao said, and an hour or two later they brought him back to his house. There they made him show his ID and then left without apologizing for detaining him or breaking his door, Tao said. And they did this in another incident with a freaking police officer. They tried to detain her because, oh my God, she's walking while black. Or Hispanic. They just said that she was a person of color. I'm not sure now if she was black. But when she finally mentioned she's a police officer, they just took off. They just ran away like the cockroaches they are. Because God forbid they would have even the minimalist of manners. But, that's not what this administration wants from ICE. They want thugs. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security described the ICE operation at Tao's home as a targeted operation, seeking 2 convicted sex offenders. Okay, then wouldn't you want to know from the very fucking beginning that you have the right person? If that's true, you would want to know that, that this is the person you want. Not just some random person you decided to grab and harass and terrorize. So, yeah. I mean, that's great if you had someone that you were looking for, but make sure you have that freaking person. It is mind-bogglingly stupid that you would put someone through this for like an hour or two. Even if it wasn't freezing outside. Just the trauma. And, we have the wrong person. Well, if you just let him show him his ID like he wanted to, you wouldn't have had this problem. So, yeah. No wonder that today, January 23rd, Minneapolis, and actually all over Minnesota, they're having an ICE out protest. People aren't going to work. People aren't going to school. People aren't going to shop. Minnesota is dead today. Or as dead as can be. And considering if their weather is anything like ours, because our weather is clear, as you can see from my window. The weather is clear, but it is freaking cold. This feels like temperature. It is 14 below degrees Fahrenheit outside. So, yeah, just for that. And, I hope these thugs are patrolling, and I hope they freeze to death. I really do. The U.S. citizen lives with these 2 convicted sex offenders at the site of the operation, DHS said. The individual refused to be fingerprinted or facially ID'd. He matched the description of the targets. And as we all know by now, nothing that comes out of this administration's mouth should be taken even with a grain of salt. I mean, with an entire salt lick, maybe. Because, no, that is not what happened. There is freaking video showing that is not what happened. So, yeah. Just like the video of Renee Good, they are trying to tell you to ignore what you're actually seeing, and they're telling you what you're supposed to be seeing. Tao's family said in a statement that it had categorically disputes the DHS account and strongly objects to DHS's attempt to publicly justify this conduct with false and misleading claims. Tao told the AP that only he, his son, and a daughter-in-law and his grandson live at the rental home. Neither they nor the property's owner are listed in the Minnesota Sex Offender Registry. The nearest sex offender listed as living in the zip code is more than 2 blocks away. Now, there could be one of two things. Now, it isn't above ICE because, let's face it, run-of-the-mill police officers do shit like this. But, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that ICE went to the wrong residence, like they had the right house number but wrong street or whatever. That's a possibility. Or two, whoever used to live there doesn't live there anymore and they have outdated information. That's number two. Or number three, they're fucking making everything up. That's also a possibility. And I hate that I live in a world where I have to question whether the government isn't just pulling shit out of its ass. DHS did not respond to a request from the Associated Press seeking the identities of the 2 convicted sex offenders or why the agency believed they were present in Tao's home. Well, of course not, because that would probably prove that they were lying to begin with. Because otherwise, if these are convicted sex offenders, why wouldn't they release the names? Obviously, they don't think that they're underage because this was an older man. So, obviously, they don't think that. Anyway, Tao's son, Chris Tao, said ICE agents stopped him while he was driving to work before they went to detain his father. He said he was driving a car he borrowed from his cousin's boyfriend. Court records show that the boyfriend shares the first name of another Asian man who has been convicted of a sex offense. Chris Tao said the 2 people are not the same. So maybe there was something to it, but okay, then why harass his father? That literally makes no sense. I mean, okay, there is someone with someone's name who is tangentially related to this family who is a convicted sex offender. First name, not even last name. I mean, okay, what the hell? That is still not putting you in any good light. Especially in this day and age, this should not be hard. But then again, considering how many people on Twitter somehow manage to harass the wrong person because they have a similar-ish name to the person they want to harass, I'm going to say this is par for the course because that's the type of people that are being recruited by ICE right now. So, these are not geniuses we are dealing with. Okay. The family said they are particularly upset by Chong Li Thao's treatment at the hands of the U.S. government because his mother had to flee to the U.S. from Laos when communists took over in the 1970s since she had supported American covert operations in the country and her life was in danger. Tao's adopted mother, Chua Tao, was a nurse who treated CIA-backed Hmong soldiers in the U.S. government's secret war from 1961 to 1975 against the communists, according to the Hmong Nurses Association website. Chua Tao, who passed away in late December, treated countless civilians and American soldiers, working closely with U.S. personnel. Her daughter-in-law, Luan Si Mao, wrote on a GoFundMe page for the family. Chong Li Tao says he's planning to file a civil rights lawsuit against DHS and no longer feels secure to sleep in his home. Both completely understandable. And I really, really hope that something comes of it. Because in case you don't like that ICE is being referred to as the Gestapo by no other than Joe Rogan, Greg Bovino, who, granted, he's Customs and Border Protection, not ICE, I will grant you that, but for a administration that cares about optics, which is why every woman who's associated with it, except for Tulsi Gabbard, probably why, she's, being tucked away in a closet somewhere, and you never hear from her, has so much plastic in their faces. Hell, the men have plastic. Have you seen Jared Kushner lately? So, since they care so much about optics, what does he go and buy? A long coat that looks like something the fucking SS would wear. And for those who don't know who the Nazi SS were, that was the true believers. It's not someone who was, we're part of the Nazi party, but we don't actually agree with this, but we want to stay alive. No, these guys were actually true believers in the Nazi cause. So, he goes and buys this jacket. I mean, I'm sorry. If you don't want to be seen as the Gestapo or as Nazis, maybe not dress the part. That would work. And no, dressing like thugs and wearing masks isn't much better. Or any better. I don't feel safe at all, Tao said. What did I do wrong? I didn't do anything. And that is the problem with, and this, like I said, has happened with police too. This idea that you have incomplete information and then you draw inferences and you assume you know what the fuck is going on. Because I'm pretty sure that Chris Tao told them that this is his cousin's boyfriend's car. So that should tell you that it's a different last name. So, I mean, I guess it's possible that it just so happened to be the same last name, because I think Tao is not that unusual of a last name for Hmong. But still, that's obviously not this family. He is dating a cousin of this family, but is not this family. And if their brains weren't frozen, and I cannot say it's because of the Minnesota weather, if their brains were not frozen, if they actually had any, they would, make sure that this is the right person. But no, they didn't. And they compounded it by going to his father's house and refusing to look at his ID. As if that wouldn't clear things up earlier. And then once he was sent somewhere without his ID, then they're like, give us your ID. How could I fucking do that if you wouldn't let me grab it, you dumbass? I mean, seriously, how much evidence do you need to know that these are not good people? That these are people who took this job just so they can harass minorities. They do not give a flying fuck if they happen to actually catch a bad guy. If they did, they would probably orgasm on the spot. Seriously. They are that despicable. All right. So that is the end of that article. And wait, did I say that this was... No, I'm sorry. This was from PBS. Where did I get that this was AP? Okay. So, but the next article is from the AP, and it is related to their thuggish tactics of ICE. Immigration officers assert sweeping power to enter homes without a judge's warrant, memo says. I'm sorry, the Fourth Amendment called? All right. Federal immigration officers are asserting sweeping power to forcibly enter people's homes without a judge's warrant, according to an internal Immigration and Customs Enforcement memo obtained by the Associated Press, marking a sharp reversal of long-standing guidance meant to respect constitutional limits on government searches. Oh, Jesus Christ, people. Why do we have to put it in a nice terms? Just say that don't say that this is not respecting constitutional limits as if it's, oh, it's a slight oopsie, it's okay, everything will be fine. No. At what point in this regime are we going to realize that they don't give a flying fuck about the Constitution? Maybe the Second Amendment. But that's about it. Possibly the first, but only when it involves speech that they engage in or that people they like engage in. But otherwise, they do not care. If it doesn't benefit them, they do not care. So just go out and say it's a blatant violation of the Fourth Amendment. The memo authorizes ICE officers to use force to enter a residence based solely on a more narrow administrative warrant to arrest someone with a final order of removal, a move that advocates say collides with Fourth Amendment protections and upends years of advice given to immigrant communities. The shift comes as the Trump administration dramatically expands immigration arrests nationwide, deploying thousands of officers under a mass deportation campaign that is already reshaping enforcement tactics in cities such as Minneapolis. For years, immigrant advocates, legal aid groups, and local governments have urged people not to open their doors to immigration agents unless they are shown a warrant signed by a judge. That guidance is rooted in Supreme Court rulings that generally prohibit law enforcement from entering a home without judicial approval. The ICE directive directly undercuts that advice at a time when arrests are accelerating under the administration's immigration crackdown. The memo itself has not been widely shared within the agency, according to a whistleblower complaint, but its contents have been used to train new ICE officers who are being deployed into cities and towns to implement the president's immigration crackdown. New ICE hires and those still in training, are being told to follow the memo's guidance instead of written training materials that actually contradicted the memo, according to the whistleblower's disclosure. Right, because the written material actually gives a shit about the Constitution, whereas this memo does not. It is unclear how broadly the directive has been applied in immigration enforcement operations. The Associated Press witnessed ICE officers ramming through the front door of the home of a Liberian man, Garrison Gibson, with a deportation order from 2023 in Minneapolis on January 11th, wearing heavy tactical gear and with their rifles drawn. Okay, if he has a deportation order, then it should be no problem to get a judicial warrant and, knock on his door and take him into custody, if that's the case. But no, these people thrive on being thugs because they have tiny, tiny dicks. They have tiny dicks and they have to compensate for it. Just like our president. Documents reviewed by the AP revealed that the agents had only an administrative warrant, meaning there was no judge who authorized the raid on private property. The change is almost certain to meet legal challenges and stiff criticism from advocacy groups and immigrant-friendly state and local governments that have spent years successfully urging people not to open their doors unless ICE shows them a warrant signed by a judge. Which, again, is completely reasonable. You want to make sure that you're not being, especially now that ICE decided that they're not going to do something like, make it obvious that they're ICE or show their faces, act like thugs. Of course you're not going to open the door for thugs. The Associated Press obtained the memo and whistleblower complaint from an official in Congress who shared it on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive documents. The AP verified the authenticity of the accounts in the complaint. The memo, signed by the acting director of ICE, Todd Lyons, and dated May 12, 2025, says, although the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has not historically relied on administrative warrants alone to arrest aliens subject to final orders of removal in their place of residence, the DHS Office of the General Counsel has recently determined that the U.S. Constitution, the Immigration and Nationality Act, and the immigration regulations do not prohibit relying on administrative warrants for this purpose. Right, let's completely ignore the Fourth fucking Amendment. Because, I'm sorry, the Constitution doesn't just apply to U.S. citizens. But as we saw in the last article, they don't give a shit about that anyway. Even if it did only apply to U.S. citizens, they still do it. So, but the Constitution does not apply to just U.S. citizens. It applies to everybody in the country. The only people that it's a bit of shenanigans is those with diplomatic immunity. But otherwise, the Constitution applies to you if you happen to be on U.S. soil. I don't know why this is so hard. The memo does not detail how that determination was made, nor what its legal repercussions might be. Homeland Security spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin said in an emailed statement to the AP that everyone the department serves with an administrative warrant has already had full due process and a final order of removal. Okay, so there's still a Fourth Amendment right to not break down their door. The Fourth Amendment doesn't say, oh yes, you cannot forcibly go into a person's house unless they're a criminal and you're deporting them. No, that's still not how this works. She said the officers issuing those warrants had also found probable cause for the person's arrest. Okay? So, if that's all well and good, then why is it so hard to get a judge's sign-off? If you have all the evidence, getting a judge's sign-off shouldn't be hard at all. She said the Supreme Court and Congress have recognized the propriety of administrative warrants in cases of immigration enforcement, without elaborating. Of course not, because she doesn't actually know any of this. She's just shooting shit out of her ass and hoping that people are too dumb to ask questions. McLaughlin did not respond to questions about whether ICE officers entered a person's home since the memo was issued, relying solely on an administrative warrant, and if so, how often. Whistleblower Aid, a nonprofit legal organization that assists workers exposing wrongdoings, said in the whistleblower complaint obtained by the Associated Press that it represents two anonymous U.S. government officials disclosing a secretive and seemingly unconstitutional policy directive. A wave of recent high-profile arrests, many unfolding at private homes and businesses and captured on video, has placed a spotlight on immigration arrest tactics, including officers' use of proper warrants. Most immigration arrests are carried out under administrative warrants, internal documents issued by immigration authorities that authorize the arrest of a specific individual but do not permit officers to forcibly enter private homes or other non-public spaces without consent. Only warrants signed by judges carry that authority. All law enforcement operations, including those conducted by ICE and Customs and Border Protection, are governed by the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which protects all people in the country from unreasonable searches and seizures. People can legally refuse federal immigration agents entry into private property if the agents only have an administrative warrant, with some limited exceptions. The memo says ICE officers can forcibly enter homes and arrest immigrants using just a signed administrative warrant known as an I-205, if they have a final order of removal issued by an immigration judge, the Board of Immigration Appeals, or a district judge or a magistrate judge. The memo says officers must first knock on the door and share who they are and why they're at the residence. They're limited in the hours they can go into the home, after 6 a.m. and before 10 p.m. The people inside must be given a reasonable chance to act lawfully, but if that doesn't work, the memo says they can use force to go in. I have to admit, at least there's some reasonableness in this memo, but the fact is that we are dealing with thugs. And first off, an administrative warrant won't cut it to break in, but even if it did, these are thugs, and how much you want to bet that none of them give people the option of legally cooperating. No, they probably just go for force right away. Should the alien refuse admittance, ICE officers and agents should only use a necessary and reasonable amount of force to enter the alien's residence, following proper notification of the officer or agent's authority and intent to enter, the memo reads. The memo is addressed to all ICE personnel, but has only been shown to select DHS officials, who then share it with some employees who were told to read it and return it, whistleblower aide wrote in the disclosure. Because nothing says everything's on the up and up than to limit the paper trail. One of the two whistleblowers was allowed to view the memo only in the presence of a superior and then had to give it back. That person was not allowed to take notes. A whistleblower was able to access the document and lawfully disclose it to Congress, whistleblower aide said. Although the memo was issued in May, David Klingerman, Senior Vice President, Special Counsel at Whistleblower Aid, said it took time for its clients to find a safe and legal path to disclose it to lawmakers and the American people. ICE has been rapidly hiring thousands of new deportation officers to carry out the president's mass deportation agenda. They're trained at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Brunswick, Georgia. During a visit there by the Associated Press in August, ICE officials said repeatedly that new officers were being trained to follow the Fourth Amendment. But according to the whistleblower's account, newly hired ICE officers are being told that they can rely solely on administrative warrants to enter homes, to make arrests, even though that conflicts with written Homeland Security training materials. Lindsay Nash, a law professor at Yeshiva University and Cardozo School of Law in New York, said the memo flies in the face of what the Fourth Amendment protects against and what ICE itself has historically said are its authorities. She said that an enormous potential for overreach, for mistakes, and we've seen that those can happen with very, very serious consequences. Okay, so that is all I have for that article. And we've seen already the consequences of that. And, they say that they're trying to go after the worst of the worst and blah, 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 blah. Well, I just read an account where I think it was, I'm trying to remember what the conviction was of. And I think it was some type of fraud. I can't remember the exact crime. But instead of facing a judge and dealing with the consequences of said crime, the DHS, Homeland Security, offered to let them self-deport before a trial, before they're convicted, before they have to face any punishment or give money back. They can self-deport, which says that they care more about ridding the country of immigrants than justice. So, yeah, this is just horribleness upon horribleness upon horribleness. But anyway, that is all I have for this video. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one.